Hey, everybody, and good evening. Thanks for joining us today. I am Norris Howard, the head of collegiate content for Checkpoint XP, and we have a really great conversation for you all this afternoon, evening, and in some cases of a couple of our panelists, the very wee hours of the morning, all about journalism, esports journalism in both the pro and collegiate space. So I want to introduce our guests before we get into the conversation. First up, we have Tom Daniels of the Esports Insider. We have Adam Fitch of Dexerto, and we have Kevin Hitt of the Esports Observer. Good evening, gentlemen. Happy to see everybody is healthy and safe and sound at home.
Thank you very much for having us. And I'll be honest, Norris, I just want to say I'm looking forward to chatting to you so much. This is going to be the best hour of my life. I'm sure of it.
Well, I appreciate it, and thank you so much. But first and foremost, obviously, there's a lot of folks who are, tuning into this conversation to hear about, all of our expertise and experiences in the journalism world, and I want to start there. There are going to be a lot of students who want to get into this field. What are some of the most important things? Let's get this right out of the way. As decision makers, in many cases, what are some of the things you guys are looking for in new writers and aspiring journalists when it comes to your individual publications?
Why don't you take that, Adam?
Go on, Adam. You go. Okay, I personally think I think the perception is you have to be a really good writer, and of course I think like being a competent writer is great and it helps. Of course, I actually don't think that's the most important part when it comes to actual journalism, right? If you're news writing, then that's part of it. But I think being able to source a good story is a big part of it. I think networking is essentially key and probably one of the elements of the job that is overshadowed by everything else, right? I think if you're sourcing stories, you need the sources. So I personally find that was something that helped me very early on when I was getting started. Was actually just reaching out to people, cold calling, cold emailing, and building up kind of a source network, but also a reputation among people as just a decent guy, And as I say, writing is of course important. Like that is the medium which we tend to choose to communicate our stories. But I do think there are other aspects that are actually maybe equally as important, if not more important, that are sometimes overshadowed because of that.
Yeah, and I think personally, Adam, you hit something that's really important that I think a lot of folks don't think about is that concept of reputation. We see it all the time. We see it, with people being thrown off Twitter literally not 24 hours ago. But the concept of reputation is incredibly important, and the cold email. I mean, building up a reputation at the bare minimum of being professional is incredibly important. Are you on time? Do you respond to emails when you have a deadline? Do you get your stuff done before deadline? All that kind of stuff I think is very important. And Tom and Kevin, just I want to ask you guys, just as your experience as writers, what sort of techniques and things have you guys learned in the esports realm that has helped you guys forward your work and your publication?
I'll go first then. So I think that actually what's really important when I think experience obviously is the main thing that I think everybody kind of says is that you've got to gain experience, whether that be through writing, through doing other sorts of media in the esports space and in the journalism space. But I think what's even more important, and this comes down to the writing, is knowing the audience of what you want to portray your experience to. So I think that the big kind of thing is obviously Esports Insider, we take this for an example, is a kind of B2B related publication. So our audience is to other businesses and it's the business related news stories. And so I think what's really good is if you want to kind of create a niche for yourself when you're writing and doing things, and this doesn't have to be for a publication, this could be by yourself, via a blog, via your website, which you've created yourself, which you can easily do, is find that niche and kind of create kind of an identity around that. So you're not just kind of doing what other people are doing in terms of gaining experience, but you've proven that you're able to actually go deeper than that and find more things. For example, I covered league. I interviewed League of Legends players in the UK scene. Just did interview. And not because I expected it to kind of get loads of views, but because then it gained me kind of the knowledge of kind of one, how to interview someone, and two, it kind of gave me a knowledge of what a specific sector looks like. And I think that's really important as well.
First, let me just say thanks again for having me. It's really it's awesome to be here with you three, Adam, Tom, Norris. Nice to meet you here in this virtual world. I think there's a couple ways that I've seen that have really stuck out to me in terms of how you would enter the this world of esports journalism, as we call it. Couple things. One, and I think Adam may know this guy, but one of the guys whose story I think is very interesting is George Getz. He was a guy that who is now was freelancing for Dot for now, but I think he's got a gig coming up here. He's going to announce. But he found some people that he knew in the Counter-Strike community, and he was able to gain access to get some information and found a couple of stories that resonated with the Counter-Strike community. And after finding those stories and working those stories up to a degree that is worthy of publishing, he sent out a couple emails to folks and found me on LinkedIn, found me on Twitter, and said, Kevin, I'm new, I've never written before, but I've got a story and I'd love for you to look at it. And he sent me these stories, and the next thing you know, I signed him to a 6-article contract just to see if he can, do what he says he's going to do, just like Norris, what you mentioned earlier, that professionalism aspect, right? So we put him on a 6-article contract. He fulfilled all those things. He did exactly what he said he was going to do, and he provided access. And then the other way that I've found is my mentor, Shannon Terry, who used to own Rivals.com and comicbook.com before he sold those. What he used to do is he would scour the internet looking for those passionate bloggers, if you will, and those people that seem to have an inside grasp of their, like, Alabama football. There was a guy that was putting out the signings before the coach did. And they found him, and so what he did was he signed just a very large group of bloggers, put together his Rivals.com, and then sold it to Yahoo for like $40 million or something like that. So I look at those two ways. I really agree with what the other two said, like have a passion and have a little bit of access, because we can help you write. We can help you learn the technical portion. But those people that are go-getters, that are getting after it, those are the guys you want.
Absolutely. And I 100% agree with that. And one thing I definitely want to ask, because I get asked this question a lot, especially dealing with a lot of college students on really a day-to-day or weekly basis, is that what are some of the things that you guys wish you knew starting out that you know now? Specifically about doing esports journalism. And I'm going to go out and start and say, don't be afraid to be specific. And what I mean by that is that a lot of times when you start out, you'll get in touch with, say, the LCS or the LEC, or, you're lucky enough to get on a press pool somewhere. And you'll say, just give me anybody. And then next thing you know, you get the bottom of the barrel person who barely wants to talk to you. They can't wait to get away from you and on with the rest of their day. And essentially, of no fault of your own, you end up getting a interview or a quote that maybe is not the best. And you got to be specific. So when you go in like you're somebody who knows what they're talking about. Ask for the people you want to talk to. And if you don't get them, have a second, third, fourth choice. Do that for every interface you have, I think, with any league, team, sponsor, brand, whatever. Be very specific moving on. And for you guys, what are some of the things that you know now that you wish you knew when you were first starting out?
Oh, I will happily jump in on this quickly. I would say, look, if you want to make an impact on the industry, so of course you want to make a name for yourself, and then you'll get greater access, so and so forth, right? I think the main thing that's helped me is actually realizing that you can look at other industries and learn that way. Because if you're looking at what is already in the industry and then thinking, okay, I need to do that to make a name for myself, that's actually counterproductive, because you're just replicating or attempting to kind of fill the shoes of someone that's already doing something, right? Instead of going, okay, what's happening in tech right now? What are they doing in sports that we haven't got in esports? Like, how can I find a way into the industry, or a certain sector that I can cover, or a different style of coverage that is not done anywhere else? That's a cheat code. You're not having to create your own style as such. You can adapt it even. And that's a surefire way to find something that works in an industry that's more established than what we have right now, and that has more people in it. Because face it, there's not too many esports journalists actually in esports right now. There's a lot of news writers and press release regurgitators, not too many journalists, right? And that's just the facts. Like, there's space for there's more people. So I say, borrow great ideas. I don't think you can really create something new anymore. I think it's just adapting and adding your own flavor to it. So I look what is done elsewhere, see how you can bring that to the industry you want to get into. Hopefully that's esports. That's why you're here right now. And that's a really good way of, you know, like, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can just make sure it works for what you're doing and the industry you're trying to break into. And that's something that took me a long while to really work out. I tried hard to fit in and then wanted to stand out by fitting in. And it makes no sense. It's counterintuitive, counterproductive, and frankly, just not going to get you anywhere, you know?
Yeah, no, and you know, I'll completely concur with that. I mean, obviously, there was some tweets last week, a couple weeks ago, about people being really happy about ESPN esports shutting down, and you know, I think, to me, obviously, you should never be happy about people losing their jobs, but their whole point was that we don't need to do anything that sports is doing because sports is not esports. That doesn't make sense. Traditional sports have been around for over 100 years. Clearly, they're doing something correct. And so I think it behooves esports, and not necessarily just for the journalism part, but to your point, Adam, to say, well, what are the things that have worked? And how can we adapt those for our space? And how can we improve upon them? I mean, you don't build a house on a crappy foundation or on a foundation of air. There has to be something that came before. And so last thing I want to ask, Tom, you know, you guys specify in sort of the business to business content. And one of the things that I was very curious about is how different is that from an editorial process, as opposed to just, you know, scores and stats and all that other stuff? Do you find that it takes a little bit longer to write that kind of content, or does it come naturally, you guys?
I would say personally that it all depends on kind of the story which you're wanting to tell. So I for example, I think you look at a press release and everybody will get the same press release. However, what kind of might be like new Dota champions come in could be great for the score. You kind of have to go 4 or 5 paragraphs down to kind of realize, oh, and also we're doing this with the esports scene, or also we're doing this with funding, and kind of more of the more interesting stuff that actually businesses themselves would actually find relevant. Because right now, from a B2B perspective, they're not going to really care about kind of, oh, this new Dota champion can do this, you know, and these abilities and things like that. But what they're actually going to want to care about is, you know, kind of how's the funding going, kind of how is the esport progressing, because there could be potential investors, which then they would also kind of share this new story with and say, look, you know, this is kind of showing a growing scene, and, you know, and that kind of helps businesses as a whole. So I do think it takes a little bit of time. I think it's also good, though, to find the right contacts. There are a lot of businesses out there who are very happy to kind of have specific business related stories for that very same reason. And so sometimes it might not be best to kind of look at one contact, but actually look at multiple contacts and be like, right, I've seen this quote from this tournament organizer. Why don't I just send them an email and kind of get more information on that? And that's what we kind of hear a lot, especially with sponsorship news. I find that a lot with sponsorship news. You kind of see things like, oh, we sponsored this, because a lot of it is just kind of, we're just going to do promotion and stuff like that. But then actually, if you ask these businesses, you can kind of get more details into it, kind of more details which make more sense to kind of a business related news story than consumers. Because I think consumers right now at this point, because they care about the sponsorship, but kind of not the nitty gritty details. I do think that will change, though, to be fair, but that's a different topic. So
Yeah, no, definitely. And so now I kind of want to shift gears a little bit to the collegiate space because in 2021 I think that there is going to be a larger spotlight on specifically this collegiate esports space, and I am probably of the 5 people I know in all of esports who have any focus on collegiate esports. But I'm curious to talk to you guys about this simply because I think it's interesting to get the perspective of people who are looking at it from the top down, from the pro scene, and then looking at the collegiate space. So one thing that I definitely want to ask is that it seems to a lot of folks that there is a lack of coverage, if you will. And so I've gotten this question as to why do you think that a lot of other publications of which you guys work for have not necessarily done a lot of coverage around collegiate esports? Now, in the case of Tom and Adam, I understand that it's very different in the UK. But specifically for Kevin, why do you think that collegiate hasn't necessarily reached the heights of the pro scene in terms of coverage?
Well, I just don't think it's ready yet. I think they're getting there. I think it is a burgeoning property in terms of sports. And you and I know, and I would guess, here in the United States, right? Everybody, we play sports and we go out in the field and we want to be like LeBron James. We want to be Michael Jordan. Well, right now, there's really not that many people outside of our gaming community that anybody can go, I want to be that guy, because you don't even know who that guy is yet. And as esports start to grow, and again, I mean, I don't know if you guys would agree, but I think esports started, if we could, really started to take off anywhere between 2013, 2015, where money started to come into the space, right? And we're just babies in history. We don't yet have hundreds of years, of sport in order to say, oh, remember that? Yeah, I do actually, because I was there. But your grandfather isn't going to say, I watched Babe Ruth hit a home run over the right field fence on a called shot or whatever it was. We just don't have the history yet. However, I do think those things are starting to change, and I think it will change when the institutions of higher learning and high school come to realize that esports is actually very inexpensive to run. After you buy the rigs for a year or whatever, that cost is there, and those you can still use the same graphic cards to play for a long time. You don't need to update them every year. So I think when they find out the ease at which esports can be implemented into their program, because you got to remember, our school boards and our chancellor boards are still run by a whole bunch of rich white folks that don't understand what's going on. At least, here where I live, I can say that. And when they hear video games, they automatically say, those are terrible, you shouldn't play them. So once the narrative changes across at least the United States, as younger, more progressive people come into school boards and become principals and all those kinds of things, I think you'll watch esports in high schools and collegiate specifically explode into something that you'll see more mainstream coverage of.
Yeah, I completely agree. I still think there is a large barrier right now in the casual esports space where there are people who are casual fans of the NFL and of college football who can kind of get a smattering of information in order to follow it kind of passively. What I want to ask Tom and Adam is, you guys are football fans. We were chatting before before we went live. As football / soccer fans, you guys are very used to that sort of academy system where, kids are snatched up from, grade school and start playing association or professional football. Do you see something like that being adopted wholly in the esports space? Or do you think that, America's more collegiate system where there's a high school, college, pro sort of pipeline, which one do you guys think kind of bodes better for esports growth? Because that's something I've always been curious about.
Do you want to go for it, Tom, or do you want me to tackle it?
Yes, I will happily talk about this one. So, I think that there's room for both. Is the honest answer, but I am going to kind of sway towards more the academy system, because the way that I kind of love an academy system is that there's stories, I think, within an academy system, and there's narratives which you can create within an academy system. Like, we kind of like, I'll be using a little bit of UK, but I'll try and not use so many UK examples. But you have someone like Steven Gerrard, for example, at Liverpool. You know, he's a player who not only was a world-class footballer and soccer player, but he also had this narrative around him because he was the homeschool academy guy and he worked his way up. And I also feel like by having academies, you're actually creating a stronghold for a brand themselves as well, because you're creating kind of that relationship between a player and a brand, where I feel like sometimes with Collegiate, there's a lot of shifting and a lot of changing, at least from what I get from my perspective. So for me, the growth of esports is the growth of brands themselves, because I feel like that's how the esports scene kind of grows. The better the brands, and you kind of shift that player kind of people following players to actually more people following brands. I feel like academy systems do actually suit that overall, in my opinion.
And I'd like to attack the other part of your question, if that's all right, Norris, quickly.
Of course.
Approach it with with kindness. So you asked if we've seen anything kind of adopted so far in esports, and while there's a lot of investment going into collegiate esports, it seems in North America right now, with obviously several entities trying to become like the de facto one that rules over everything. In the UK, the only real system we've got in place is not actually in place yet, but it's being promised, and this is Guild Esports, obviously minority owned by Beckham. They're saying they're going to put in a talent pipeline, and they want to kind of adapt like the UK approach from sports. Now, whether we actually see that at any point, who knows, because they did promise to announce a sponsor in November, and we're in January now, and we still don't know it. But you know, according to the press release, Beckham is really excited to have that feature in this organization, and that's what's going to really make them take off and be something new in the esports space. And I apparently, from the people I've spoken to, it is a big source of optimism for the people who've chosen to invest in the organization since they went public. So while we haven't got anything yet which would replicate anything we've seen in traditional sports in terms of a talent pipeline and academy, apparently it's on the horizon. And of course, we're in esports. As I say, you can steal ideas. So if that goes well, then who knows? We may see Fnatic trying to do it, Excel trying to do it, and so forth. And if it works in the UK, with esports being an entirely global industry, and there's no kind of real best way of doing anything right now, I don't think there's a best practice in esports in any area particularly. Who knows? Like North American teams could implement something like that, like in America, everywhere, you know. So we'll have to see how Guild does it. They're the brave ones investing into that side of things, but apparently we'll see. I don't know yet. And of course, we've got like in League of Legends, we've got like the second and third tier leagues with like the UKLC, which is like a DreamHack and Riot Games, and underneath that the UKEL as well. So we've got a bit of an academy system there, but it's not. I don't think it's really structured and formalized the same way as we see in say football, which is obviously our biggest export and our biggest spectacle.
And I would say, to fair on top of that, as a kind of an American organization kind of doing a pseudo academy system, is FaZe as well. We've recently seen the launch of FaZe Academy being kind of one, like it's not an academy system as such, but it's kind of like it's a pseudo academy, and it's following kind of a similar structure. You've also kind of got 100T with their like next program, 100T with their next program, I think. And I believe TSM as well do it with League of Legends. And then to be fair, to put it on the other side of a collegiate way, we also have Null, which is university esports as well. So we still kind of have that's a very similar system, I think, to collegiate in kind of Null, and we also have like Belong. So we kind of have still like educational more system. So that kind of proves that there's not really, like you said, a correct way right now. We're just finding a way to nurture talent and to grow the scene as a whole.
Well, and you know, to sort of, you know, for lack of a better term, defend the American way of doing things.
Shocker.
One thing I will say though is that what I think collegiate can do that the pro scene can't do because simply there's not enough space is in American sports. There's this concept of a collegiate legend. There are folks who will probably make it to the pros or only get to, the bench level of pros and really not perform at that level. But there are some kids in every sport that are collegiate legends. And I think if we want, esports to grow and get to that casual saturation that we talk about, where, any kid, a kid from Des Moines, Iowa can sit back and say, I want to be the best League of Legends player, in my city, in my town, or in my state. They could begin to do that. And, they go to the University of Iowa, they become this, blue chip recruit. And this is my headcanon. I'm rambling. I'm a madman when it comes to this kind of stuff. But I think we can get there. And I think that's sort of part of the role that Collegiate could definitely fuel. And I think, to Kevin's original point, I think if we get to a point where you start seeing that happen more often, brands, publications, and all of you.
Well, it's about participation, right? It's about how many people can play esports in the two systems. And coaching internationally in Europe, their pipeline is specifically set up for the pro team circuit. It's like, you go here, we are going to make sure that we are looking at you for this. In our educational system, it's almost more about participation than it is about a pro pipeline. That's why we have Division III, Division II, NAIA, JCs. It's because they want to have more people playing. And I don't know the numbers. I don't know if having an academy system is going to produce better pros than using a numerically statistical system that says, well, you have 100, we have 100,000. Who's going to be better? I don't know, because the academy system produces fantastic players. They do. I mean, I've seen it. I've seen it in women's volleyball across Poland, Germany, Spain. I've seen it. For us here, we're more about right now, I feel like participation. And while that doesn't bode well for the NA pro esports scene, as you can see, I do think that a lot of people playing is a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and we are now joined by Nick Barazio of Inven Global. How been, Nick?
Hi, I just want to say I disagree with everything anyone has said for the last 30 minutes. It's all been wrong. Even though I wasn't here, I'm just assuming, right? I'm just assuming it's all been nonsense.
You must be talking to my boss.
No, but it is so nice to join the panel, even if it's halfway through. I was going to make up, there's like technical difficulties. No, your boy thought it started at 4:30. That's it. Like, that's the technical.
Your honesty is refreshing.
Is my brain.
It's good. Honesty is always the best part.
You remember when we was discussing being professional earlier and being on time?
You did.
Listen,
I'm not gonna lie. That was part of what he was talking about.
I'm only here so I can bring you guys some real practical insights into what's holding esports back. It's people like me, all right? You don't want to be like me. You don't want to be checking your calendar halfway through and realize, oh, wait a minute, the tech call was like, you should be here at 4, not. Yeah. So anyways,
welcome, Nick.
Yes, thank you. Honestly, it is an exciting time, though, just now that I can actually add into this convo. I do think if there was ever a place for collegiate esports to level up, it would be in 2021. I think the schools are in not panic mode, but pivot mode, right? They need to
panic mode. They need
panic too. See, Norris knows. But all of the universities I've been talking to ever since we put on our big collegiate summit, there's either 2021 is their first year of esports, and they're very excited about it. They're like, oh my God, I can't wait, which is just, by the way, if you're trying to find a job or something within esports, I would definitely start talking to universities that have just started their own esports thing. That's they need help. But there's also some schools that are like, oh no, we used to have this massive XYZ sports presence, or we used to have this massive so-and-so, but now we can't do that, and we don't have any kids wanting to sign up. Oh, and look, that school over there, how come they're getting all of this enrollment just virtually? Well, it's because they have an esports program, right? So I personally think a lot of the things that Kevin was just speaking about, it's all true, right? Like if you want to have like the most clear answers to why collegiate esports isn't there yet, it's because it's the level of play, the level of stakes. But I do think that there's a way for collegiate esports to rise past all that, and it's through community. I'm just as a gamer myself. My favorite years of gaming were in college at my local Smash a weekly, at my local Street Fighter weekly. It was when you could find a group of gamers that would grow and expand and do so via their collegiate pride. We had crew battles. We were always trying to face the other schools. I mean, and this was in Arizona State. A lot of really good Melee players came out of Melee, even some that still compete today. So I personally think that kind of like founding ground, this like ability to have a really, really competitive community, find that talent who's able to then make it into the big leagues, so to speak. I think that's important.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so in the interest of time, we are going to move a little bit away from collegiate, but definitely to Nick's point, he's absolutely right. If you're looking for a gig like right now today, reach out to some colleges because they need help. As somebody who talks to them every day, they need help. Lord in heaven, they need help.
Sounds like you need help if you're talking to them every day as well. Mate, have a break. It's just been Christmas.
I know it's wild. But I want to move on to some 2021 sort of predictions, future casting, that sort of stuff. What do you guys see for esports in terms of development, esports and gaming as we move forward? We know that COVID is still very much a reality for all of our respective states and municipalities. What role do you see esports and gaming taking in 2021? And I want to start with Adam on this one.
Let's chuck it to me. I was looking around the room thinking, why would you chuck it to me?
He saw that.
Know, man.
Because you looked so wise when you
exactly,
were thinking.
yeah.
You just came up with something.
I think 2020 has proven that things can be unpredictable. So I find it hard for me to put my finger on something that I truly think will happen. I think one thing we've seen is esports was used by traditional sports and even like bookmakers and in betting when things went quiet. And then we've also seen that they've gone quiet on us. Now things are back. So I personally, I'm interested in seeing the retention that we get from the extra attention we've seen in 2020, especially on like the betting side. Just I don't know. I just think that's a really untapped part of the industry, and I think it's going to be a big part of it going forward. I'd be hasty to drop any like hot predictions as to what's going to happen. I'd love to see live events come back in some capacity. I think what happened with Worlds last year was incredible and probably not spoken about enough. Say if there's like 240 players and supportive staff there at least, and then all the event staff and no reported cases. I believe there's no COVID cases there. And then for the finals, they managed to have some crowd there. If we could have some semblance of that back, that would be great because atmosphere is obviously a big part of esports, as has been proven this year. Yeah. And I'm sure we'll see some of that as long as they don't do what Flashpoint did and, have a bubble and then let them go out afterwards. Anyway, it's ridiculous. So I don't really want to even try and throw something out there because I just think it's just kind of going with the flow right now. All the countries got their own versions of lockdowns and how they're approaching things.
That's going to be big. Yep.
So it's all segmented, and I can't make an overall statement or kind of guess really or prediction based on I'm not trying to cop out of the answer.
Yeah.
No, I think you hit on the answer though, if I may, Adam. The last thing that you said about being segmented by all the different countries, I think that is going to actually be the overarching theme of 2021. It's going to be who can get visas to go when and where. When is the United States going to say, you can't invest in Tencent? What's Riot going to do? I mean, there's a lot of things coming down where there's going to be these trade wars. And right now, particularly between the United States and China, that I feel are really going to affect esports as a whole. As you guys saw, once they started the lockdowns, the events couldn't go forward, right? Because people couldn't even get into their own home country, which is part of the reason why I believe it was the Spitfire moved their whole team back home because they wouldn't be able to go back home if they left. And so for me, just 2021, jumping in, I think Adam hit it with that very last thing. I think you're going to see a tremendous amount of uncertainty and a lot of video game companies really trying to figure out what to do because of the global landscape of the pandemic and how countries are being affected by it.
Yeah, and actually, too, I would say that for all of the companies you will see lagging behind and you will see kind of scrambling, I think that there's going to be a few that already are extremely unprepared for what the new age of esports will be. I will sing the praise of whatever a creative director or art director works at Epic Games and had the foresight to put on those Fortnite concerts, the Marshmallow concerts, the Travis Scott concerts, right?
Yeah.
You know, because as the rest of the world is forced to do things online, we're really starting to ask, like, you know, like, does esports ever need to be in a big event? Like, did it ever have to be? Or were these just things we were doing to try to recreate what we think a natural competitive like event should be? Like, all of the setup, all of the lights, all of the so-and-so, that can be easily reproduced and in many ways made to be a more gamified experience, a more enhanced experience through online. Like, why not see the worlds for like League of Legends inside the game client? And then why not inside the game client have this amazing like BTS performance, right? And like, why not I be able to see through the eyes of my favorite player, right? These are all things that I think we know are possible within the games themselves. And I think too, if game developers want to finally kind of put the hammer down and say, how can I make real capital off of this esports? How can I, control the esports like what Blizzard really wants with the Overwatch League, right? How can I control everything and really make this an experience that is amazing for every single esports fan? Because just to remind y'all, 2021, if you're trying to make money in esports, is about expansion. How do I expand this audience base? How do I get the casual gamers? How do I get the people who have only watched esports once or twice? And then how do I capture the esports fans who are kind of tired of the same old esports, that they want something new? So I hope that the game industry leaders like your Nintendos, like your Epics, your Riot Games, even Blizzard, if it gets its head out of the sand, right? I hope that they start taking more big leaps of what we can do with gamified experiences, virtual experiences, and things in which only esports can do. I think the more we focus on those things, that is when we're going to keep being in headlines, keep being on, everyone's mind in terms of us being a huge industry that you want to invest in. So I hope we see more of that. I hope we see more.
All right.
Of that
So more Louis Vuitton collabs.
Yes. Yes.
So Tom, you will not escape this question. What's something that you're looking forward to in 2021 that you think may happen?
Honestly, from a personal perspective, I'm really looking forward to see how some of these sports investments turn out in 2021. Like, I think that 2020, we saw a lot of athletes kind of go into esports, and whether that be through community or through creating their own esports organizations themselves. Obviously, we saw that investment with David Beckham. That's the big one, which everybody knows. But we've got like Lando Norris, who's a Formula One driver, who's created his own esports brand, which is kind of following like a phase model, it seems. And then we've even got like current day footballers, like soccer players like Sergio Aguero, also creating their own esports brand. So I want to see kind of how these are going to develop, because there's been so many of them. I can't imagine them all being successful, but I want to see the approaches. And I think it's really, really interesting to see how different ones are going to approach. I know that there's been another soccer player who, like Casemiro, KC Sports, he's gone straight into CSGO, for example. He's kind of got rid of kind of FIFA and gone straight into CSGO, where Sergio Aguero has gone more FIFA. Like, I'm really interested to see how these investments are going. And I kind of want to see how we're going to try to see how traditional sports is going to interact with esports even more in 2021, because I think it's going to continue. I don't think this is going to be something which is just going to go away. I think that we're actually going to see a lot more modern day sports players and modern day football. I know that I don't think Adam's agreeing with me here, but I think we're going to see a lot more modern day sports players, because they're used to gaming. A lot of them are gamers themselves, and so this is their passion. This is their pastime, and it'll be interesting to see how that integrates.
Well,
But yeah,
and they're just big ticket personalities, and they're big ticket celebrities, and like it's a pretty safe way towards, you know what, maybe I should multiply my audience reach times 2 just because this person's
Just
involved,
'cause.
right?
No,
Or like
yeah,
maybe I should be able to reach out. I think those are all great points, Tom.
Yeah, and so the last thing I want to say is I think everybody is for the most part correct, but I will have to say, along with Adam, I am incredibly interested to seeing how the gambling aspect
Oh
of
yeah.
esports is affecting the industry in 2021. Because let's just be perfectly honest here, traditional sports is not what traditional sports is without gambling, without a sports
Yeah.
book. For many people, there's no reason to have 24-hour news about it unless they can go and bet on it. So that in and of itself
true.
is I think a big thing. But we do have some questions coming in from the chat that I want to throw at you guys. The first question, I have no idea who it's coming from, but here's a question: is how does one go about submitting press releases to esports and news sites? Is there a cost? So that is.
So I can answer yes and no. Like if you want to submit a press release, I'm sure every single publication here has like a standard email. I know like Inven Global's is desk@invenglobal.com, right? So yeah, just like send it to us. But just to be warned, like journalists get like hundreds of press releases a day. So literally as I scroll every morning, it's like, yep, ignoring 99% of these because they're not interesting.
Yeah.
Right. So if you don't want to take that approach, yeah, you can pretty much go to any like publication and just send an email and say, hey, I'm interested in some direct publication, right? Like, what can I do? And there's like sponsored posts, and there's ad spots and things like that. So I would just email, just try to reach any of these sites.
Yeah, and for us, one of the best things you can do is not start a sentence with Kevin Hitt Company, the most glorious, most well-renowned company, the #1 in all of esports. Because as soon as I see a sentence that says you are the best, you are this, you are that, it immediately throws up red flags. I cannot deal with that kind of stuff. It's like, we were the first one. No, you weren't.
And we already know that Kevin's the best, so automatically you know you're right.
You had to just get like a not so subtle flex into there as well. Like, all these people telling me I'm the best. It's so annoying.
That was an example of a bad thing to do.
No, yes. You were saying that people write that to him.
Yes.
That they're the best.
Oh my God.
Okay, understood. Sorry.
I will.
Oh my God.
It's tight. It's late. It's late here.
Yeah,
It's late.
No, I get it. Shit, I'd laugh at me too. But no, the way that you write the press releases are really important. Just don't start off with that you're the most wonderful thing ever to come through esports, because you're gonna probably just get deleted.
Lots of photos, lots of photos or images. Like if your press release has no images, zero chance I'm ever.
It's very helpful to get that title pick, isn't it? When they send you some assets.
Zero chance.
Absolutely. Zero chance I read any press release with no photos, period.
Yeah. Then I gotta find them.
Yeah. So the next question coming in is, what is the best way for a collegiate program to contact esports news sites? Direct DMs on Twitter, email, follow the chain on the site, et cetera, et cetera. So I guess I'll take this one.
Please,
it's the same. It's pretty close to a press release. If you send a good press release to my email or any of our staff's email, chances are it'll hit my desk and we'll talk about it. The biggest thing, though, is that if you're an individual, participate in conversations, be visible. If I get a cold email from a random person who I've never seen from anywhere ever, it does drive down my willingness to look at it. But because, folks like Adam and Tom and Kevin and Nick, you see these guys around, you see them on Twitter, you see them talking, you see bylines, you see all this stuff because they're active. So that's another big thing. Make sure your program, if you're representing a program, make sure that program is active. If you're Sidewalk University esports program and you have, 3 followers and 2 posts on Twitter, I'm probably not even going to think you're a real person.
Yeah,
So that's
true.
that's
And
really
that's happened before.
If you see like dead socials, you're just like, all right, well, there's no point.
Fake,
Like,
and it's
PRs have come through.
absolutely, and it's not about follower counts, because I understand that certain programs are just starting off. It's not always about follower counts, but be active. Like you said, if we see dead socials, it's over. It's over. And one more question here. What was the dumbest thing you had to report on or that rolled your eyes when reading it? Here?
This is a
I want to
fantastic
hear
question.
Adam because I think Adam will give you some flavor.
Adam gets a
Take
lot
this
of.
one first.
Oh, I thought you were
Who's
saying
reading about
I
it?
just report on a lot of dumb things.
No, you're so. I think you, man. It's like I'm getting beat up over here. No, no. I think you're articulate and you make it sound really funny.
I just think the crazy things probably hit your desk or email inbox or whatever. But yeah, what is, and this is an open question to everybody.
Me on this one. I want to make sure I've got pure flavor for you now. I'm gonna have to put real thought into this.
I mean, okay, so here I can start then because we know Adam's going to drop the bomb, right? I think anytime I am essentially forced to write about a streamer or a pro player and their just overall life drama, like, I say forced because sometimes like the person is so big that it really does become that day's news, right? Like when Dr. Disrespect was having marital issues, well, what else are you going to write about? Literally everyone on Twitter is making a huge deal about it. Everyone online is making a huge deal about it. And if you don't like mention these things, we all know the amount of views that you just lack is huge. So for me, that's just my general statement. Anytime I am pressured into like writing about someone's life that is just outside the esports, that's always such a pain. It's like, oh man, what a dream.
Yeah. Tom.
So I think
Tom's too nice for this.
Yeah, I'm very nice. I think to be fair, like not in terms of something that I've reported, but some of the things that I've received. I think that when you just receive like a Twitter DM which says, can you report on me?
Yeah.
For article because, for example, like I just want to get verified. Genuinely, I got a DM once saying, "Could you report an article about this story about me and someone else because I want to get verified and I want to kind of get a following and stuff." It's like
That wasn't me, right?
Are
anything
we
like that?
the
But just never
gatekeepers
gonna come.
for
Never gonna-
verification? I didn't know that.
I better start deleting DMs.
I'm not verified. Damn, I
got verified
I'm doing it wrong.
yesterday. Let's go.
I wrote a letter trying to stop that, and they still did it.
There we go. No, that's the reason they did it, just to spite you.
No, it's been well deserved and deserved for a long time.
Oh God.
Yeah, no, for sure.
I don't like it.
Yeah,
I will. Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I really like what Tom said. It's like, can you report on me? And I get things like that quite often where somebody will just send me a press release and just say, would you report on this again? Because it helps me get verified or it gets my product out. And I'm like,
and there's always some doctors. There's always random doctors that are like, hey, look at the thing I've been researching.
Don't get me started on the esports textbook.
Oh yeah,
and
esports med.
The
med
people
The
with
professor.
no. Yeah, the professor.
Yes.
Did you see that? Yeah.
Oh, the press and the profit, the biggest grifters in all of esports. Yes.
The professor who's actually like a faculty aide that puts professor on his stuff, and I called him out on it. I just like, yeah.
I will say though,
I didn't write that. I didn't write that one.
The nicest thing that I've ever received is when a pro player needs help with a visa, either from China or from South Korea, and they're like, hey, can you write about my performance here because I'll be able to show this article and then get the visa. That I'll do all day. That's actually, I hope that's something that more international players know of. Like, you really can just ask pretty much any esports journalist and we'll help you out, because we know how hard it is and how much it sucks to not be able to make the tournament because you don't get the visa or you don't get the travel pass. So that's a That's
Yeah.
a lighter note.
I will have to say the dumbest thing I had to report about in 2020 was a amateur Call of Duty tournament during the height of COVID that
Ooh.
decided they were gonna have a in-person event.
Oh no.
That was the dumbest thing. And not like dumb, like haha, like man falls off roof or anything like that,
Yeah.
but just the layers that tournament had to go through for multiple people to sit in a COVID infested internet cafe. Just
Like, why?
blew my mind. So that was the dumbest thing probably I've ever had to
Oh,
worry
and
about esports.
Mr. Beastburger. We wrote about Mr. Beastburger and how he now has 300 burger chains in the U.S. Now, there's a story there, but that was dumb. We ordered the food and we ate the food and it was fine. Like that was it. Sorry, it's a burger. Yes, we opened the burger joint.
All right, Adam,
Everything
you
Okay.
got the pleasure of wrapping up.
It's not too spicy, but I can name the company, which adds a little bit more spice to it. You know, I think so there's an Isle of Man based bookmaker called Lookbox who have done a lot of raising over the past year. They significantly benefited from the rise of esports betting due to the absence of sports. Now, I don't think this is overly stupid, but all I'll say is they went on to raise a lot, and instead of waiting until their round was finished, they kept putting in these updates out there via PRs, and people like me was thinking, okay, this must be it. Okay, I'll write this. And then they thought that was an open invitation to get free press forever. No. And the best part is perhaps them saying, okay, we're going to go public, and their new CEO, Quentin, saying, there is no way this is going to slow down now. This is esports' time. There is like what we're seeing right now is just the tip of the iceberg, and this is it. We've the fuel has been added to the fire, and this is it now. And then there is based on the bookies that I've spoken to in the past few months, the retention has not really been there. CS:GO and League of Legends still very popular, but the rises were in your FIFA's, NHL, NBA, and once those like sports came back, like it all dropped off. So I haven't really heard too much about Lookbox since, but that's something that stands out to me, where it's just they've capitalized on the moment, and they're either selling a dream or they've like completely swindled everyone out of money while they can, and they're going to disappear this year. I don't know which one it's going to be, but Lookbox, either James McMath, who's handling their PR, is an absolute genius, or is going to be an absolute dumpster fire. But either way, I'm interested in it, and I do think it was an interesting, quite dumb.
That makes sense. Yeah, no, for sure. Especially when, man, what is it? The thing about counting your chickens, right? If you're going to go and pop off in a PR, and then that doesn't come to fruition, how come you didn't send me another one, telling us that it didn't happen? So,
if you've been so vocal for ages, and then you suddenly become quiet, some of us will start to notice that and question things.
It's bad. It's bad news.
Exactly. It reminds me of the H3 league, but that's.
But actually, I think we actually got time very quickly for one more, which is when trying to put out feature articles, what are the important things you are looking for? I assume that's in the writing process.
Human connection, mastery of game. Is there any sort of analysis for like a high level discussion there? And the last one would be new take on an old issue that is more relevant than ever. So those are my three. You know, it's got to be a human. So if this is for like the broad person, I just want to learn about why esports is so thrilling. Number two is that heavy analysis. I love it when someone writes about like, this is a new technique or new strategy or new build or whatever, and that gets tons of views because most people just want to learn about the game. And then last, there's a lot of ways in which like older games, or how do I put this? In esports, it's very popular to say like dead game, right? Or like, oh, that game's so and so, but it's not true. That's actually not true at all. Like every big esport that you think exists likely very much still does exist. Their community is very much in their own world. They're still consuming the content. So I love it when I can get a feature about, like an esport that isn't always in the limelight. Because if you just have a really great article or a narrative about a tournament, it can really pop off because people kind of rediscover the esport through your writing. So those are probably my favorite features.
Absolutely. I think some of my favorite stuff is about esports that a lot of people don't talk about. Obviously, some of my favorite esports stories of the past few years have come from like Farming Simulator, and you know F1, and stuff like that. Those stories are great. But to Nick's point, the human element, obviously. And for me personally, what I love to read is heavy data aggregation stuff. So like when OWL was doing stuff with their stats and talking about Fleta deadlifts and stuff like that. And I'm just like, oh, thank you. But in terms of writing, it's always about the human element. It's got to be about the human element. If somebody is going through a struggle and they overcome it and they really, really, really perform well, that's always going to drive people, I think, to read about it. So those are some of the things I look for when I'm writing a feature.
I think for me, especially with opinion and analytical pieces, because I think that there's kind of different types of features out there, but opinion and analytical, I look at every feature and I look at the end of it, and if I can be like, I find that very interesting and I could speak to anybody about that, then I think that I've done a good feature, or a good feature has been done, because I feel like if a topic has been created around it and it's a good topic with a good cause, and it's a good question which has been asked and maybe answered, but then also discuss future, I think that actually that's a really good feature, because that drives engagement, that drives, I always, every feature which I give, I try and give to a neutral or a friend, say, like, read this, what do you think? If you think that's good, then I feel like you've done a good job of a feature, because you've drove someone into that, especially with opinion pieces.
Absolutely. And Adam, once again, you have decided to go last.
I was just letting people speak, I was interested.
I don't know. Blast right there.
I just I either want to start a conversation or further a conversation. For me personally, nothing too fancy. It's like, have I got something to add onto this? If so, I might do it. And realistically, I just hope people either feel something during and after reading it, or they learn something after it, and that's basically, I don't know, and I think I can't really add too much onto what was said, because they're all so eloquent and perfectly put, and pure displays of mastery.
I do agree that that
so
more
friendly.
Farming Simulator content is definitely needed. I love reading about Farming Simulator. It is so fascinating.
I mean, non-ironically, I agree with Tom.
Genuinely, it's
completely.
brilliant.
Like part of what made me fall in love with esports, and I think many people have the same through line, is when it's the moment of awakening in which you see a game for the first time being played at the highest level, and you're like, oh, that's what this game's about. Like, I didn't even know people played like this. I still recall the first time I saw StarCraft played like that. I still, recall the first time I saw Tekken played like that. These are just games, but I love that. So I would actually, in terms of a farm simulator, is great, but I think Tetris is one of the most undersold, slept upon esports ever. Tetris is a fantastic game. Actually, they just had one of the 3-time world champions just pass away. So rip the Tetris community. I know that was tough, but I think Tetris is a really, really fantastic game, and there's so many amazing storylines there, and people still play it on the original Nintendo. It's
yeah. And Kevin, you're an investigative journalist, so this is what you do.
Yeah.
So
I was gonna say, I'm gonna go against the grain a little bit here when thinking about this topic. From a business perspective, is there an audience for it? Because if you don't get views, you're not going to be employed long. All right, let's just put it out there. And there's a time and a place for articles that stimulate other games. That's not what I'm saying. But for me, is there an audience? I want to know that. And usually being in the scene for a while, you kind of understand if there's an audience for certain titles or genres. Is it interesting? Does it elicit emotion? And does it give me information that I didn't have before? Those are my 3 concepts with the overall umbrella of, is there an audience for it, that I look for when looking at feature pieces and other works.
Yeah. All right, guys. I just got to notice that that's going to be it. And the last thing for me is that if it will make me yell. Because I also, mostly am broadcast more so than writing. If it can make me yell about it, it's probably good.
The hype.
But with that said, thank you all so much for joining us. on this panel. It's been a great conversation. I've been thoroughly enjoyed and enlightened, and I hope everyone out there has been as well. And we are going to relinquish our time to the next panel. Thank you so much, and we hope everybody has a safe and sound weekend.
Yeah,
Cheers.
thanks everyone.
Thank
See you later.